So good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Envisâge interview series, in which we meet individuals acting as vector of change in the fight against ageism towards women. My name is Alexandre Gosselin. I will be your host for today's interview. I am a student, an activist, a feminist, and a traveler, and I use the pronoun he, him, his. Like always, I'm with my partner in crime co-hosting today. Good morning, Kat.
Good morning. How's it going?
Good, good. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Kat Huang, and I'm also co-founder of Envisâge. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, and I am a public policy student, a dog lover, and a sustainable art enthusiast.
Thank you, Kat. And today we have the chance to have with us Rachel Peru. Rachel is a 50 years old curve model embracing her natural hair and silver hair and curvy figure. She is represented by the Bridge Models in London. Rachel is a strong activist against ageism in the fashion industry and society in general. She has been involved with the Be Real charity, working for body confidence, and the Mind charity, which focuses on mental health. She is also a podcaster. Her podcast, Out of the Bubble, highlights the many profiles of women from every spheres of life. So good afternoon, Rachel, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. So my name is Rachel Peru. I live in the UK. I would use the term she, her, hers, and I am a silver-haired curve model, a podcaster, and a body confidence activist.
And Rachel, just before we launch into the main topic, at Envisâge, we are a social project that is all about educating ourselves about the complex universe of ageism towards women. So maybe before anything else, could you introduce in your own words your definition of ageism? Where do you see it in society in general, and maybe your own relationship with ageism towards women?
I see ageism as society putting limits on people's lives just because of their age. So they're expecting limits and limiting us from living our true lives just because we've reached a certain age. I'm now 50, and since turning 40, I've been much more aware of ageism in society and how people expect you to behave, look, dress. So I'm much more conscious of it now that I've reached what I would call midlife.
And I think Kat is starting to be patient to ask questions, but just before we start in the main segment, I would like to ask you also, because this is a term that will probably come back during the interview. So just so we're clear, could you define for us midlife women? And for people listening at home, maybe that would be helpful.
I mean, lots of people see it as differently, but I would say midlife is usually women over 40 that have reached a certain age where they are at a crossroads in life, and if they've had children, the children have grown up, left home, so they've got an opportunity to redefine themselves and rediscover themselves. So it's a period of change physically and also mentally.
Thank you. So without further ado, Kat, I think you have some questions, so I will hand you the virtual microphone.
Thank you, Alexandre. So I was hoping today that we could learn more about your journey and your accomplishments in chronological order. So, starting with your career change to in your 40s, right? So there tend to be, let's say, pressures, even stigma against maybe inadequate support for midlife women considering transitioning to a different career path. I think personally of my own mother's pivot to education from architecture, and it was not without excitement, but also challenges, right? So could you tell us a bit about your own story and maybe what advice you would give for women 40 plus thinking about going for it?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't set out, I changed careers and became a model when I was 46, so I didn't set out thinking that I was going to have this career at all. I actually got divorced when I was 39, and I was working as an early years teacher at the time. So I then went back to university and got an education studies degree when I was 41. So I thought I'd got my career mapped out and I was going to be, you know, an early years teacher, and that was it for the rest of my life. And just various circumstances, my daughter became ill, so I stayed at home for a few years. So the teaching stopped. I found myself doing some charity fashion shows, and the photographer was really encouraging and said, "You're very photogenic, why don't you try it?" And, you know, obviously getting divorced at 40, I was in this process of refinding myself anyway. So it helped build my own confidence back up. So I thought, well, actually, I've got nothing to lose. So at 46, I sent off images to different model agencies and surprisingly got picked by a London agency immediately. And I've been working ever since. So I love doing what I'm doing now.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. And what would you say for women thinking about going for it, making this type of change in their lives?
I think we overthink everything as women. I think we're really bad at overthinking it. And so I think if it's something that you're really passionate about and you think you could want to do, I think you've just got to start and do it and not put obstacles in your way, because there's always going to be obstacles, but we always get around them somehow. And I think if you've got the right support behind you, it's much easier to just step out of your comfort zone and just go for it, because even if it doesn't work out, there's another way of learning something else about yourself, and it might lead to something else. So I think it's just doing it, just getting on with it.
Yeah. And I love what you said about support as well. I think that's something that we can do, you know, for the women, the midlife women in our lives, just support them in whatever, you know, whatever change they want to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think if you've got children, I think it's really important that the children get on board and help and support the woman in the household that wants to make these changes, and just to allow them the freedom to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Yeah, so I guess before moving on to your activism and your podcasting, I wanted to touch on a major theme that Envisâge has been exploring recently. So workplace or industry-wide discrimination towards women 40 plus. This happens across industries. So we were also wondering, curious about your experience in your industry, in fashion and modeling. What has been the workplace culture so far? How have things been off camera, I guess? And have you observed any progress or changes?
Yeah, I think it's definitely there in the fashion industry for sure, and I think all my model friends of my age group would all say the same thing. But there's limited amount of work for models that are over 40 and 50, which when you think that the actual financial market of women's kind of expenditure in the fashion industry that can go out and buy, have got disposable income and go out and buy clothes in the 40s and 50s, to then not be represented by models they can relate to is just crazy to me. I still don't get why it doesn't correlate. I think there's changes. I think it's getting better. I think there's still quite a lot of tokenism. You know, they'll include one older model in a campaign, and it's a tick box exercise. But you've got to start somewhere. So I suppose they've got to start just gradually increasing the amount of older women they use in campaigns. Particularly, something that I'm really passionate about is swimwear and lingerie. It's really hard to get campaigns booked for older women in swimwear and lingerie, which it's like writing off a whole generation of women that want to wear nice underwear or want to be on the beach in nice bikinis. It's just so dismissive, and I think that's something that I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that outrageous. I was actually in a store the other day with my mother shopping for underwear, and she looked up and saw an advertisement of a woman with gray hair and stretch marks. And she said, "Wow, someone who looks like me." And it was so profound because she had never seen that in her whole life, I think. So yeah, it feels like there's change happening, but slowly but surely, I guess.
Yeah,
So,
I hope so. And I think we have seen some huge shifts. I think, you know, the Me Too movement made a massive difference to how women were perceived of any age. And then I think everything that's happened with the Black Lives Matter, I think that's opened up the whole conversation for everybody in society to talk about all these isms that have been going on in society. So I think there's a real positive change for the better, hopefully.
yeah, I hope so too. Yeah. Okay, well, so yeah, moving on to the next phase, I guess. A recurring theme in your podcast that I've picked up on has been body positivity and being your real, authentic self and embracing I guess, what you look like and who you are, right? And loving yourself in that way. So you've identified yourself as a body confidence activist. So what is this exactly? And could you talk about your work with Be Real, the Be Real campaign?
Yeah, I mean, in my 20s and 30s, I really, really struggled with low self-esteem and body confidence. I really didn't like the way I looked, and I just didn't feel happy in myself. And looking back, I can see it stopped me achieving and trying things so often because I was too self-conscious about things. So it wasn't until I reached 40 that I finally felt like I grew into my body and I accepted it. And it was such a liberating, freeing kind of movement, really, to get to where I am now. And now my favourite jobs are swimwear and lingerie because I feel super confident in myself. And I talk to so many women in my age group that are still struggling because obviously in your 40s your body changes, we're going through the menopause or perimenopause. You don't know what's happening to your body. It's like waking up in somebody else's body sometimes. It's really hard. So I'm really trying to, just by my own journey, sharing my own story and pushing boundaries as much as I can for my age group, hoping that that will inspire other women to just embrace who they are. You know, we've all got flaws, we've all got bits that we would want to change, but I think just embracing it and saying, okay, well, this is me, and how fantastic is this that I can get from A to B by walking everywhere with my legs, or I can, you know, go out for a run if I want to, because that's my body's carrying me. I think we've got to look at it in a different way.
Sure, yeah, so inspiring. I need to direct all of the midlife women in my life to go listen to more of your words, because I think that a lot of them need to hear that, you know, validation. And yeah, thank you. So
so the Be Real campaign the Be Real campaign is a charity in the UK that's really works with younger people to encourage them to shift the way that they feel about themselves, about their bodies, and see their bodies as something that's healthy rather than being, you know, expecting it to look a certain way or be a certain size. It's having a different, healthier mental approach, well-being to their bodies. So for me, because I knew how much I struggled when I was younger, and I've got 3 kids of my own and I see what they go through, it was just seemed like a great charity to align myself with. So I love being an ambassador for them, and we'll try and do more. I'd like to do more talks in schools in the future with them, I think, to reach the younger generation so they don't have to go through what our generation went through with their bodies. Would be a really great thing.
Absolutely, yeah. It feels like a two-pronged approach, right? We're trying to help midlife women and empower them, but then also try to help younger women and think about this earlier.
Yeah.
So I feel like something that I've been thinking about is just all of the wasted time, you know, the wasted time. I'm trying to maybe catch it early and think about myself in a different way now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, powerful.
And also not to be scared of aging, because I think if we have these intergenerational conversations, then it breaks down those barriers, and I think younger women will fear less the whole aging process, because
Right.
my generation now will be so much more open about what they're going through than my parents' generation did, and I think that's got to be a really good thing.
Yeah, and exactly, because a lot of the talk about aging is associated with fear and just negative emotions, when it's a quite beautiful process, right? And we should be embracing it. So absolutely, intergenerational communication, we need more of that. Yeah. So yeah, well, okay, so moving on to your podcast, Out of the Bubble. I actually had the opportunity to catch your most recent interview with Star Monroe on Instagram Live. Yeah, so everyone should go check it out, because you can listen to the podcast wherever you find podcasts, but you can also watch on Instagram Live. Excellent. And I love the description that you have, breaking down the midlife stereotypical barriers and proving it's never too late to find a new passion and purpose. It's just beautiful. So what challenged you to start this podcast, and what have been some major takeaways for you during this experience?
I started it because when I was obviously starting this new career, and I suddenly found myself on social media, which I hadn't done before at 46, and I came across women kind of daily, my age, that were doing exactly the same thing. They were going through a completely process of reinvention and sharing it on Instagram. And I just thought, why is this not being represented in society, in the media and advertising? how can I do my part in sharing some of these, you know, fabulous women that I'm coming across? Because it does give you a lift, and gives you inspiration when you find somebody that you can relate to, that is doing something and stepping out of their own comfort zone. So I started the podcast to be able to share stories. So I literally I find women on a daily basis that I take something away from talking to them, and just share their stories, because I think women are really bad at putting their hands up and saying, hey, I've done this, aren't I fantastic? But I think if we can give each other a lift up and share our stories, I think we've all got a lot to learn. So I love doing them. I love talking to women.
Oh, and we love listening. Yeah, it's really, really great just to hear the stories. And then also you interview people who've started businesses, on women entrepreneurs. Really amazing. I just saw about the bias cut. Yeah, about starting like online shopping for women 40 plus who, you know, just they're not a targeted audience a lot, you know, in clothing industry. So yeah, really great. So
thank you.
Yeah.
It must also be such a learning experience for you. Well, at least for us, doing interviews like this and just engaging in conversations is so educational. So it must also have been for you, Rachel. Have you learned maybe life lessons through the Out of the Bubble podcast? Was that a learning experience for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think the main thing I take away from talking to all the women that I have done is to not let fear stop you from doing something. Because, you know, I do get nervous about doing things, and I step out of my comfort zone regularly because I know it's where I grow the most. But it's so easy to take a step back and kind of hide from doing it. So I think making sure that you don't let fear stop you is probably my key thing that I've learned from all these amazing women.
From another podcast that you done, I also heard that you at one point decided to jump from a plane, right? So I think you know a lot about bracing fears. So, but as time is running short, I'm so sorry, but I think I will wrap it up, even if we have so many other interesting questions to ask you. Just before we conclude, Rachel, I would like to give you an opportunity maybe to address directly people listening to the interview, and maybe answer the question, how do you envisage or project envisage age inclusion looking like in the future, and maybe what can people listening to us do to support this age inclusiveness in the future?
I think that there is huge change happening, and I think intergenerational conversations are the most important thing that's going to make the shift. Because I think if the younger generation understand how the older generation are feeling, then we can get these conversations going out there, and it will alter the language that we use in society around aging, which will then feed through to the marketing, which will then feed through to the fashion industry and the business industry. So I think language and talking and having these open conversations is the way forward. And hopefully we'll break down these barriers, and it will shift, and we will be much more inclusive.
That's definitely super interesting. There's a word you use in the interview, tokenization, that I think is a word that is emerging, and I would like to come back maybe in another interview. That's super important. We also discussed in a prior interview about microaggression. Also, that is something that I see a lot about regarding ageism in the workplace also. So thank you so much, Rachel, for your time. And thank you also, Kat, for your great questions. I would like to say, if you would like to get involved or learn more about Rachel's work, you can visit her website at rachelperumodel.com. Rachel, is there another maybe reference that people can go see?
Yeah, I have actually literally just this week changed my website. So it's now outofthebubblepodcast.com. So I've rebranded. So I've got a new podcast. And you can also find me. My main platform is Instagram. So I'm Rachel Peru 1 on Instagram, and Facebook, Step Out of the Bubble.
We will make sure to put all the links in the bio. And also, just before we go, finally, I would like to say that Envisâge is super excited to prepare its international conference on ageism towards women that will happen in mid-November. Again, we will put all the details of the conference attached to this interview. So thank you so much for listening to us, and see you at the next interview. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.